I'll put it this way. Open up a Claude Code project and ask it to design you a bridge or a skyscraper. And then I want you to take that design and I want you to go and build it. And then I want you to go and sit in it. Are you going to be comfortable doing that? Are you going to be comfortable driving over that bridge that it designed? Right.
No.
Until you stop shaking your head, we need those engineers in place.
Welcome to the Better Stack podcast, where we have conversations about software development, AI, and all kinds of new technology. I am one of your hosts, Andres, and I'm joined today by...
Richard, hello.
And...
Amin Astaneh.
Hi, Amin. How's it going? Happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is a pretty great pleasure.
So from what I've known about you, I kind of think that you are kind of like an SRE wizard. You're very deep into that realm. You host your own podcast on that topic. So we're just curious about how did you start in that area and what's been your journey through the software development career so far?
Yeah, good question again, Andres, Richard. Thank you for having me. Yeah, how did I get started? Well, when I was in high school, my girlfriend's mom introduced me to Red Hat Linux. She was taking like a computer science course in community college, and she just showed me her desktop, which wasn't Windows. It wasn't Mac. I was very confused. What it was a KDE desktop running on Red Hat Linux, and I was enthralled. And I started to get into it all the way back in high school, junior year of high school, and then got my CS degree and been very interested about infrastructure, been very interested about operating systems and teaching a computer to do things that previously we didn't have control over. So that was the beginning.
So you've always been like a proponent of open source software, I imagine, if you're using Linux?
Oh, 100%. Linux has been my daily driver for over 2 decades now, like since 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when was the point where you got very serious into SRE?
Yeah, that was around 10 years ago. So prior to that, I was a classic operations person at a rapidly growing PaaS SaaS company called Acquia. If you ever heard of Drupal, the founder of the Drupal open source project, he founded a company. They did the professional services and the hosting and the support for Drupal websites. So I was in their operations team. But as the company grew, and it was rocket ship growth, lots of big clients whose names you'd recognize, with that scale came a lot of manual toil. There we go. Now we're talking about SRE now. There was a lot of manual toil. There was a lot of incidents. We were starting to come up against the reality of operating at scale versus the architecture that we originally started with and the processes that we started with. So I started reading the Phoenix Project. I got into the practice of cloud system administration, which was the first book on SRE. It wasn't the Google SRE book. SRE was like a few pages, and it had 12 practices in it. And again, I was very, very intrigued and started to practice it. And
I don't actually know what is the Phoenix Project.
Oh my goodness.
Elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the Phoenix Project was like the original DevOps book. And
it's a really good book.
Yeah. So it's a story,
Yeah.
and it's about like the VP of IT operations dealing with some significant organizational problems. And he, through the guidance of like this mysterious mentor who you originally later find out he's like a board member of the company, he's teaching him about like old school plant manufacturing concepts and how it directly applies to software engineering and IT ops. And it introduced a lot of concepts that I still use today and talk to clients about today, because it's extremely relevant. So yeah, that was the original book. But then beyond there, I read a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of it in the world of management. So in addition to all the technical stuff that I'd be reading just to skill up and being an SRE and as a software engineer, there's also the management stuff, because DevOps and SRE is a socio-technical practice. You're bridging the gap between what technology can do and how humans use it to make good business outcomes.
And I imagine there's a lot of human error involved in that and handling with it, right?
I mean, yes, absolutely. I mean, there's a book about human error that you should probably read too. Yeah, there's a gentleman. His name unfortunately escapes me right now, but he is a like professor in Sydney, Australia, and all he talks about is like airline accidents and how human error. Right. So like it's very useful in postmortem culture. Like human error isn't where we end. Like if you say, oh yeah, the reason why we had this incident, this production incident, was human error. No, that's the beginning of the discussion. That's not the end of it. Like what factors contributed to, that person in that place fat fingering that command and blowing out the production database? Like should he have had access to the production database? Were the tools ergonomic? Did he have sleep last night? How much did he get paged? There's all kinds of things. But yeah, when people say human error, I immediately identify with that book. I'll have to give you a link for show notes.
Yeah, I think I remember my first introduction to end-to-end testing was I was listening to this course where someone said about this incident where there was some kind of a software developed for surgeons and you had to like click the buttons in a certain order, but the surgeons got so used to clicking them that they clicked them so fast that the software started glitching and nobody had expected that might happen. So that's kind of interesting.
Definitely. Intersection between humans and automation is something that we have to always pay attention to in the products that we operate.
Yeah. And then I also heard that you started with DevOps and SRE during the beeper era where you had to use pagers. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, yes. The first time I was on call, I was issued a physical pager. And now granted,
oh wow, what year was that?
It was 2005.
Oh wow, okay.
So my first tech job, oh this is great. I was working in a garage, as every successful startup does, in Plant City, Florida. A good friend of mine, her father had a side hustle where he was running a web hosting and email hosting and dial-up ISP out of his garage.
Wow.
His name is Curtis Fellaini. I have mad respect for him, and he taught me everything I knew. But yeah, like we were running this on-call tool called What's Up Gold, and all it did.
Good name.
I know, like, and the what it did, it didn't do HTTP checks. It was doing ICMP pings to the servers. So just old school ping, and if it didn't get a result back, it would send a page. And I had a pager. I carried a pager for a little while when I was working at that place. Immediately after, when I was working at my alma mater doing supercompute HPC, it was Nagios and, text messages to your cell phone.
Was that like a deliberate choice, or by that point, like newer technologies had already emerged, like you said, SMS messages and stuff like that?
I mean, yeah, back in those days, there was just more tools. Granted limited, but there were more tools available to monitor infrastructure at the time. And when I was at the HPC department at University of South Florida, we were already dealing with hundreds of server scale because it's HPC. It's like you have racks of servers that are doing compute jobs. So we needed something a little bit more than a pager, and the content in the page also mattered, because if you just got a message, it's like, oh, okay, I need to go check to see what the thing is from the beeper. But with Nagios, you got at least some context, like this server is down, or this service attached to this server is down. So even then, back in those days, you had some sophistication in terms of being able to configure, what you wanted to monitor on a per host or per service basis. Like, definitely pre SLO. We're not even thinking about that. We're just thinking about, is this port open and giving me a response that I expect?
Yeah, wow.
Right.
2005. I think I was in secondary school at that time. I wasn't even thinking about like computer science back then.
Yeah, I don't look it, but I'm older than I look. Yeah, I realize that.
Well, you look very good.
Thank you very much.
So
yeah, 2 decades.
Doing a bit of research on you, it seems like you worked at Meta. What did you do, and what was it like working at Meta?
Oh my goodness. So I was a production engineer and a production engineering manager. So what that basically means, it's their flavor of SRE. And I worked on 2 projects. The first project, which was just a few months, I worked on a team called Conveyor. There's actually public papers, I think, for IEEE about Conveyor. Conveyor is probably one of the largest CD systems on the planet. So all of the build artifacts that come out for the backend services at Meta go through Conveyor, and there's progressive rollout of all the changes to like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of backend services.
Are they strictly internal to Meta?
Internal only, yeah. But there's a paper by Boris Gubrick that you should go read about what they built, and it's very, very interesting. So I was there for a few months when they were scaling it and helping them with their alerting, because they were early game. It's like anything, you get like hundreds of alerts a week, and I'm like, wait, let's clean this up and get their observability into a place where at least they knew when failures were happening. And then I also put together some what would you say, like some emergency procedures to shut off key features using their feature flagging tool, just to make sure that we were able to recover quickly from incidents. So I did that for a few months, but most of my tenure was spent on another team that was in an internal Heroku of sorts. So you have very simple stateless services, and teams are churning these out all the time, and you need to run them somewhere. And that team and service existed to make that process simple, because in the old days, standing up a service was very difficult. So I was the first production engineer on that team, and it was pretty wild stuff. But that's what I did there. It was definitely a lot of fun. There are people that I worked with that just had brains 5 times mine in size. Like the people you work with at companies like that are just super brilliant, and I learned a lot there.
I was going to say, I think there's a company called Honeycomb, and the person who started it, Charity Majors, was at Meta. Did you
That's right.
Do you know her? Did you meet her?
I have. That's very interesting that you asked that. I met her at an Observability Days event a year and a half ago in Boston. I met her in person. Yes, she did work at Meta. And the inspiration for Honeycomb came from a planetary scale observability tool called Scuba. Right. So I used Scuba and really loved it, and I'm delighted that she is founding a company to do that. She and I have been talking on LinkedIn on and off a little bit lately because of our common interest in how agentic coding is going to influence reliability. So we've been talking on and off about that subject. But yeah, she's a really cool person, and it's a privilege to chat with her from time to time.
Yeah. So actually, that's a nice segue into what we also wanted to ask you. Where do you think AI will take SRE and DevOps and all these practices?
Oh goodness. Okay. So amazing plug. Thank you very much. I'll get right into the thesis here. So we have software engineers that have been given an amazing tool, which is agentic development. Everybody's like getting code magically generated from whim, from tools like Claude and whatnot. So what this means is that there is going to be an order of magnitude amount of code that's going to be flowing through our value stream, our CI/CD pipelines, our testing, our review, our code deployment, our incident response, our change management procedures. Like all of this code is going to go through that system that each of us have built for our companies, and that means we're going to stress test all of those capabilities. So, for example, there is a linear relationship between the number of changes you can make to a piece of software and the number of pages or the number of incidents that you receive. That is established fact. So it's reasonable to assume that if you increase the flow of code through your pipeline by 10x, you're going to have 10x the alerts. So how would your organization respond to that, right, is really the question. So from the SRE side, I anticipate that in the future, we operations people, we're going to be very, very popular, because we're going to be where the constraint is now. It's no longer the matter of writing code and shipping it. It's now, how do we operate it? Is it working? Is it meeting customer expectations? And so I anticipate that being the major shift. It's a huge challenge because a lot can go wrong during this transition. You can, like I mentioned, you can have a lot more incidents. How are you learning from failure? And, are you continuing to do the postmortems? Are you building a CI/CD pipeline that actually works? And basically makes it so that human effort is always high leverage. So the funny bit is that we've been preparing for this event for decades. It's just that, we tend to think about it in terms of big tech where you have 20,000 engineers. But now we have smaller organizations that could do 10 times the code, and therefore the flow is the same. So all of those fundamentals that those larger companies are, have been writing about and been talking about for the past decade now, we're all going to need to actually do. Like all the fundamentals, you actually have to do them. And so there's that. There's also the matter of organizations like software development organizations have organized themselves around the idea that, it takes the longest, like the most amount of time, like the biggest time suck is coding. So we need to make sure that engineers are spending as much time coding as possible. If that's no longer true, we have to reorganize ourselves around those activities that are now taking the most amount of time. So there is going to be a bit of a shift in terms of how we run these organizations. And then finally, and I think you've seen this in terms of the AI SRE trend, which I've talked often about in my podcast, that we are going to need to skillfully introduce that technology into places appropriate where we can get a lot of leverage out of it to do those operations, right? Because, like, for example, there are companies out there that I think a good example is Incident.io. You get paged, and before you even get out of the bed, there's already an agentic workflow that's like, okay, what changes were made to the code base recently? What do the alerts actually say? What do the metrics actually say? And try to do a first pass diagnosis, again, before you even got out of bed and got the sleepy out of your eyes. So there are some places in the operational set of responsibilities that we have that can get a lot of benefit from AI, but you don't just like adopt everything. Like you need to think about what the actual problems are and what the ROI is. But anyway, that's my thesis. I'm actually doing a webinar in a couple weeks about this very subject.
That's so interesting because the use case that you mentioned before getting out of bed, it's already paging you about something. Has that already been implemented in practice? Because one thing that I see can go wrong is that, like, let's say you have like these triage levels where first triage, like maybe the AI can solve it on its own, but then the second we need a human in the loop. And sometimes what I just to make a comparison with coding, sometimes I see Claude code when it's reasoning, it's like, I should do this. And then it's like, hold on a second. No, I should probably delete all of this and start over and do this. And I feel like the same thing could happen with these incident management bots. They're like, oh, this is a easy fix. Hold on, maybe I can fix it on my own. Situations like that.
No, you're 100% correct. I think this quote from IBM from like the 1970s has been making its rounds lately. Never have a computer perform a management decision. So what I mean by that is there are two ways that you can use this AI tooling or automation in general. There's two philosophies around automation that people have written about. The first is called the leftover principle, where you basically say, oh, okay, we're going to have software. It doesn't have to be AI. It can just be tools that does all of these things for us autonomously on our behalf. We don't have to think about it. And then we, the humans, are given what's left over, which is typically the stuff you need a PhD to solve. That's not super wieldy because then you're spending all of your budget on PhDs. And then you're also placing too much trust in a system that's running autonomously. And if it makes the wrong call, you're in trouble. The more wieldy philosophy is what's called the compensatory principle, where it's like you are force multiplying human effort. You're allowing computers and automation to do the things that it does well. And then you're allowing the humans to do the things that humans do well, which is we understand the context of our systems. We understand the problem that we're trying to solve. We understand, the customer experience. There's a whole lot of context in our brain that makes it a lot more advantageous for us to use that rather than have AI do all of it. So to answer your question more directly, I think this AI SRE tooling really shouldn't be making changes to production unless it is on a well-constrained, well-defined path. I'll give you an example. Automatic reverts of code, we do that automatically without AI. If you're thinking about Kubernetes, right? If you have a deployment and you're changing, the version of your new container image and your readiness checks don't succeed, guess what? It's not going to roll out the change, right? So those mechanisms are very simple, easy to reason about, and it allows us to be able to perform changes safely. Those types of well-defined problems, I think you can leave automation to do, and automation's doing it already. But having AI right now just say, yeah, we should make this change to our infrastructure without human input, I think is irresponsible. I think we as humans, back to the point about constraints, I think our time is going to be shifted to, is this really the right decision to make? Making those approvals. Code review and review of any infrastructure change, I think, is going to be where we're going to be spending a lot of our effort. And yes, we're going to want to automate that where we can, but it requires discipline and a track record of safety.
Yeah. And then another question from what you said earlier is what you said about this linear comparison, that the more code you have, the more incidents you're going to get. So you've been working as a consultant in this field. Have you heard that companies are experiencing it right now? Like, since they're outputting or offloading more code to AI, they're experiencing more incidents as a result.
Certainly. Definitely so. Definitely so. And I would also add to that by saying there are other failure modes that are starting to emerge due to this change. I think a really easy one to think about and reason about is your CD pipelines backing up. The latency between having a build artifact built and then having it go out to prod is taking longer and longer because there's just more changes going through it. So yes, organizations are starting to feel these pain points already. I mean, I had, just as a quick example, a case study, I have a client that I recently did an assessment for, because one of the things I do is I'm taking a look at the entire company's like operational posture, how they ship code, how do they run it, and give them guidance on what to do next. So one of the teams was like, yeah, this Claude thing's real good. Let's start churning out some features. And they did, but they didn't change how they release. They didn't have a good solid code review process. And so the number of incidents immediately shot up. So instead of them focusing on the code and just like shipping all the things that they thought they were going to do, they were getting buried by customer escalations and incidents. So like, yeah, this isn't theoretical. It's happening right now. This increased order of magnitude of changes to production is going to reveal all of the weak links in your operational posture.
And when you are like a SRE doctor that like has this client who has this problem, what is your suggestion what to do in this case? Like you just mentioned.
Right. I alluded to it earlier. All of those fundamentals that we talked about over the past decade or two, we have to focus on them. Like teams need to, for example, have a valid testing strategy. They need to know that the code that they're getting ready to ship into production is of high quality. All the things that they've learned about in the past, they're thinking about. I'm a big proponent of service level objectives. I'm a big proponent of SLOs because that allows us to understand the health of our production system from the customer's point of view. So that is a big piece of the puzzle because then it allows you to, in a data-driven way, regulate the amount of changes you're making to prod in terms of like feature requests and things like that. So that way you are not risking your existing source of revenue while chasing new sources of it. That's the business reason that you want SLOs.
One thing that I've noticed with SLOs, the previous company I worked for, they were like, each team should, maintain their SLO goals. And for some teams, since we were moving so fast, we were not meeting those goals. And then a lot of teams were behind. And the management decision was, whatever, it's more important to ship out features than to maintain SLO goals.
Yep. And that is probably the biggest reason why SLO hasn't been as effective as Google promised a decade ago. Because here's the thing, and I've talked about this in previous content. You can have an SLO program. You can go through the process of having engineers go in a corner and be like, oh, what's the user journey? And let's quantify it and let's get some observability out there. And you set up Prometheus or OpenTelemetry and get really pretty dashboards. But if the product manager, if the product organization isn't willing to play ball, if the executive team isn't willing to play ball, then it's a waste. Then you just have SREs and maybe the engineers working in a corner saying, hey, things are not healthy. And, you have the leadership wanting to continue to ship. Like, in order for SLO to be successful, it needs to be a game that everyone plays. And when I assess organizations' SLO posture, which is a big thing that I do, I tend to ask that question. If an error budget gets spent, what does the product manager do? If the product manager is like, okay, next sprint, we're changing the scope of next sprint. Good. You're at medium maturity. If they don't, you're at low maturity. I actually developed a SLO maturity model from 1 to 5, 1 being immature, 5 being optimizing, to help companies reason about where they're at in the journey. But you're right. Like, a lot of organizations, they don't do SLO. They have a dashboard. They have metrics on it. Engineers get paid for it, but business decisions are not being made using SLO. It's just alerting.
And so
right?
the type of clients that you have that come to you, what situation are they in that they require your assistance? Are they in a good situation, bad situation, in between?
It depends. So there's 2 inflection points that I tend to work with clients during. The first inflection point is like the early stage company that just got a round of funding, their sales organization is crushing it, you got product market fit, but they're a babe in the woods and they've never run enterprise level infrastructure before. They've never sold to enterprise clients before, and they're starting to buckle under the strain of that increased scale. Very much the experience that I had earlier in my career. Like, that's something I'm very, very knowledgeable about because I lived it. That's the first inflection point. And that's a fun inflection point. That's a good problem to have, though it can be stressful for the people working there. The second inflection point is usually when you're a larger organization and now you need to start standardizing how you operate across multiple teams. Maybe you have an SRE program and you need to assess how effective an SRE program is. Are the processes working? Is the engagement model working? Are the engineering teams actually participating in the process? Is product participating in the process? So companies that, do a lot of acquisitions, they will typically come to me because they're trying to tame this wild animal, because every time they do an acquisition, there's an entirely new stack they need to bring in. So there's a lot of like top level governance that you need to start thinking about in terms of making sure everyone's playing by the same rules.
Sure. And I think with the smaller companies, like you mentioned, the ones who have raised some money, with AI being around, people using AI to build features, the kind of lack of structure will be increased because people are just building features, shipping it with AI, not thinking about logs, metrics, traces, anything like that. What are the biggest things you've noticed people in the smaller kind of phase of their company come up to you with problems that are glaringly obvious to you, but they didn't see it as a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've alluded to it in a previous answer, but I'll frame it top down. So the glaring thing that I see is a broken feedback loop between what is happening in production and what is happening in the customer experience, and then what is happening in terms of product prioritization. So, and I've seen that for a long time across many teams. It is probably the common problem. So as I work as a consultant, one of the things I'm thinking about behind the scenes is how do I make sure that feedback loop is established? So it is amazing how many companies will experience an incident. Customers will get upset. They'll file tickets into support. Support gets flooded with tickets. Support has this amazing gift to give to the product and engineering organization, which is called feedback. They know what is angering the customer and what is preventing them from enjoying the service and what is motivating them potentially to leave. And I've seen time and time again that feedback being completely ignored or being placed lower in priority than the feature work. And so the end result is full steam ahead on features, even though the product is on fire. And that, to me, is something that I see immediately when I'm interviewing teams and assessing teams. But usually when you work inside the company, you don't see it because it's like, oh, I'm a software engineer. I'm incentivized on shipping features. I shipped 50 widgets last quarter. Great, I'm getting that bonus. Product managers thinking the same thing. Yeah, we got these projects out. This customer is signing with us because we did it. Meanwhile, existing customers are completely apoplectic. They're not happy with what's going on. So, broken feedback loop.
And is that because of like the culture in SF, or just because people just want to look like they're being better than their competitors? I don't know. Why do you think that's the case?
I don't think it's native to SF. I think it's just native to business in general, incentive structures, like business cultures. Because when you have different departments as a company grows, and that naturally happens because you have to organize effort, you start to silo. I have software engineers over here. I got product managers over here. Maybe they might be embedded with the engineering teams, but they got their own set of incentives. It's the support and the DevOps SRE folks, they got their own incentives, but they're all separate and they're conflicting, right? And typically at this stage of the game, no one sat down with them and said, how do we change our incentive structure so that we're all moving in the same direction? One of the things that Meta did that I really liked, and I think it works really well, is that when they are evaluating the performance of an engineer, at least in teams that I was working with, they weren't just looking at features. They were looking at operational excellence, production excellence, and they were looking at, okay, what incidents did they participate in? What reliability work did they work on? What scalability work did they work on? How do they make the system more reliable, more operable? And that applied to, are they going to get the bonus? Are they going to get promoted? It was an important part of the criteria. So when they really started to lean into that, that meant that the incentives for the software engineers changed. And on the team that I was on, where we were really pushing that forward with the engineering leads that I was working with, those engineers magically started coming to me and saying, hey, Amin, I'd like to participate on some reliability work with you. Can I take over this load testing process? Sure, absolutely. Here's the run books. Here's some scripts. Like, go nuts. And it's amazing what happens when incentives shift. So that is, I think it's just a natural progression for any organization. If you're like a tiny startup where everybody owns everything, and you're trying to get funding and you're trying to, win those initial customers and keep them happy, I think incentives are already aligned. Otherwise, the company wouldn't survive. But as you start getting bigger and you have that separation of concerns, it gets harder and harder to have an incentive structure that is aligned across the org. So yeah, this is where the socio-technical stuff starts coming out when we're talking about SRE and DevOps.
Nice.
And you also mentioned that with this full steam ahead with AI, people will need more people like you working in this field. And, at the other side, we're hearing that software engineering is dying. There's no more jobs, right? So do you think that, like, for junior developers listening to this podcast, is SRE and DevOps a good field to get into at this specific moment?
Yes and yes. So I will push back, and I will not be the person that says that software engineering is dead. I actually think that the fundamentals is even more important. Understanding programming languages and how they work, algorithms and how they work, is even more important. Because how are we supposed to review the code that an AI generates? And how are we supposed to design systems that work? Because if you just give, an LLM model, hey, architect this thing, are you sure it's going to work? Like, I'll put it this way. Open up a Claude Code project and ask it to design you a bridge or a skyscraper. And then I want you to take that design and I want you to go and build it. And then I want you to go and sit in it. Are you going to be comfortable doing that? Are you going to be comfortable driving over that bridge that it designed? Right.
No.
Until you stop shaking your head, we need those engineers in place. Right. And as for SRE and DevOps people, yeah, obviously there needs to be more of us, because that's where the constraint's going. If we're making so many changes to the system, we definitely have to make sure that it's healthy, that we understand the implications of the changes on production, that we have a CI/CD pipeline, a value stream if I extrapolate that to top level, that is healthy, monitored, and treated as a production service, because in my view it is, all of those skills are going to become even more important. It's like the way that I tend to look at it, it's kind of like, F1 racing. You have a pit crew, and that pit crew knows everything about that vehicle, can swap out every part, and gives that driver the ability to dominate that racetrack. You need those people, because that gives the product managers and the architects, the environment to iterate quickly and to be able to get those changes out without those constraints happening. So in my view, like, it's a great time to be an SRE. I feel like a couple years ago it was different because everybody was getting laid off. But I think that if you really focus on the fundamentals, if you understand, Linux and systems, as well as the socio-technical stuff, like basically what it means to actually be an SRE, I think you can go very far in this career. But we do have to be informed by this advent of agentic development. We can't keep our heads in the sand about it.
So you mentioned, was it Phoenix Project? Was
Yes.
that the book? Yeah.
Yes.
So what other resources do you think is valuable for someone who wants to dive very deep into this subject?
Oh man, I mean, there's tons. Let me get you the heavy hitter books. I mean, the DevOps Handbook is good. I felt that when that book came out, it was a great summary of everything that I learned prior to the book coming out. It's a great one-stop shop. Leading Change by John Cotter is about transformational change leadership in organizations. It gives you a framework. And when you are an SRE on a team, or if you're trying to drive a reliability transformation, it's a good thing to know. The book Toyota Kata, which is about how Toyota, does continuous improvement in the manufacturing of vehicles. Very useful. Very useful.
Weren't they
software.
one of the first ones who came up with the system?
Yes.
I think I've heard of that. Yeah.
Kaizen was a Toyota concept. The Japanese economic miracle is what created Agile and DevOps. Like, it was the precursor to that. Other books, The Practice of Cloud System Administration, I mentioned. I think they might have a new edition. Very, very useful. Yeah, like the SRE books that Google produces are good, but I will put a caveat. Those are books that were written by people that work for companies that are absolutely gigantic and have infinite budget. So the practices and the ways that they go about things are going to be different than the way that you go about things with your 4-person startup. But I think putting all of those pieces together will give you an understanding from an engineer, from a leader, and from a strategist on how to drive DevOps and SRE initiatives. So I think I have a unique perspective because I think about it holistically. I'm not just going deep on, all I do is Kubernetes and I make Kubernetes work. I'm trying to make teams work. And then after that, we figure out the technical problems and solve those.
And for all the listeners, we will link the books mentioned in the show notes.
I was going to ask, so going back to AI, I agree with you on people should learn the fundamentals and that software engineering or development isn't going anywhere. But there is a kind of trend that I'm seeing more and more of people pushing code to production without reviewing it. And I'm sure that these are people on Twitter or X, or just people showing off, and it's not really true. But there are kind of thought leaders like people who run the AI companies, like Dario Musk, saying, hey, next year in 2027, whatever, you can write code and you could ship it without looking at it, or the AI can write code, compiled code, without writing the programming language to compile that code, and so languages will be dead. What are your thoughts on that?
I seriously doubt that these thought leaders are on call, because if they were, they would be saying something completely different.
Fair point.
They're not in the information security group crying about vulnerabilities being introduced, and they're not dealing with what happens when customers are upset. Sure, LLMs can produce syntactically correct, somewhat logical code. Are they right 20, 30 something? Maybe, but even then, you're still going to need proper monitoring, observability, test in production. Okay, if you want to test in production, as Charity espouses, there is some prerequisite investment that you have to make. And in her view, it's going to be observability, understanding the behavior of your software. But even still, if I, were a government and I needed to buy software, it has to meet my security controls. If I was a medical company and you're writing software that is literally responsible for keeping patients alive, do you really think you want an LLM to generate that without review? That would be unconscionable. It goes back to the example about the bridge or the skyscraper. Do you really want an LLM to design a bridge or a skyscraper and just ship it, pour the mortar and the rebar, let's go? No, absolutely not.
Yeah, that bridge and skyscraper analogy is a very good way of looking at it. I never thought of that. If you were like an engineer from zero to hero, like, would you want to walk on your own bridge that you just built?
Yes, and here's the thing that we have to think about. So I was mentioning Curtis. I love that guy in the beginning of this episode. He was a PE, a professional engineer in electrical engineering. That meant that he went to school, he took the PE exam, he interned at a company for several years, and then eventually, after taking a big test, then and only then was he able to do engineering projects. There is a high level of discipline in how you do things. I mean, it's the same thing with doctors. Like you learn that academic, but then you're like in the field for years under supervision before you can actually do medicine. And there's a reason for that. It's because the decisions that we make have massive ramifications on the lives of human beings in the environment and in the world. And software hasn't quite caught up to that yet. And I'm not necessarily saying that we need to emulate those models, but we do have to at least acknowledge the risks that we are introducing. We do need to have the discipline to, when we're building things that affect lives of human beings, we need to have that discipline. We need to think about risk. We need to think about the adverse outcomes. We need to take responsibility. And I think there's a lot of organizations that don't want to hear that because it pushes back on their ability to make progress. But why are we writing software? We're solving problems for people. We shouldn't be introducing new ones.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting point that you said about your friend, sorry, I forgot his name, the PE professional engineer.
Curtis.
Because here in Canada, there was a discussion about here, in order to be called an engineer, you actually need a trade certification.
Right.
And then there was the debate that software engineers shouldn't have the title engineer because they haven't earned that certification.
Yes. Yeah, that resonates.
Yeah.
The level of discipline is just completely different between our industry and theirs.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to address something that you've written on your LinkedIn bio.
Yeah.
You mentioned from burnout and bottlenecks to reliable, fast-moving teams and systems. So, what's your experience with burnout?
Oh my goodness, I have a lot of experience in burnout. As a operations person at fast-growing organizations, there is definitely people that have like hero complexes, people that want to prove themselves, people that have those little things inside of their psychology where they feel they need to jump in and just own things. It's a vulnerability, right? Imposter syndrome, all of those tendencies that we all have as people pleasing, all of those things can contribute to burning out, where you are so motivated to prove to others that you are doing good work, that you're not listening to your body, you're not listening to your emotions, your emotional state, you're not being introspective, you're not giving yourself time and space to rest. Your relationship with rest is dysfunctional. Like there was a period of time where I thought that rest was bad, that idleness was wasteful. When, in this season of my life now, where I'm thinking a lot about this stuff, no, rest gives you the ability to do the big lifts later. People that bodybuild, they're not in the gym every single day doing every single body part. They give themselves time to rebuild the fibers in their muscles. So why are we saying we can't do that when it comes to our minds. So that's the theme. But I remember after leaving Meta, I was like patient zero in the gigantic wave of layoffs. So I was affected by the layoffs. That was
Sorry about that.
Oh no, I mean Shirdo Moto would not exist if it were not for that
Okay,
experience.
cool. From
right?
the ashes, a phoenix story.
Right, like that was my response to it. But that period where I'm starting my own business and I'm taking a step back from the industry and thinking about how I want to work, it really made me become very aware of the burnout that I was carrying with me and not, acknowledging. And I remember earlier in my career being the grumpy sysadmin. And if there are any folks from Acquia or former Acquia that are listening to this, you know what I'm talking about. I used to be real grumpy, and like I'm very jovial today because I've done a bit of work on myself. But that was like burnout, and I didn't recognize it. I was just thinking that too many people were coming up to me asking me for requests when they should be doing it themselves and like read the man page. You know what I'm saying? I dealt with a lot of burnout, and I think my business and the way that I run it gives me the space to tackle those challenges head on and to interact with work in a way that is more healthy and maps more to how my brain works, what I want in my life, and making sure that, I'm not living to work. I'm working so that I can have experiences that fill me up. You know what I mean? What do you think about that? I know I kind of bounced around.
I was going to say that the grumpy sysadmin, I can relate to that. Not for myself, but like companies I've worked at. There's always a guy who like knows how to spin up Kubernetes or knows everything about AWS. And if you want something from him, he's like, really? Okay. And then he goes and does it, but doesn't want to do it. So I can relate with that. But yeah, I can see why that happens and where it comes from, purely because of the fact that it happens a lot. And so I can see the frustration. And so, yeah, I think it's good to get a break from that and work on yourself and try other things.
For sure. There's personal responsibility involved in that, but it's also being very cognizant of the culture of the environments in which you work, the teams in which you work, the people you interact with, and making sure that you're choosing places that are best for you. I know the job market is still a little funky. It might be hard to make, those types of choices, and being able to say, I'm just going to go to another place. That might be really difficult to say. I recognize that too. But at least being mindful of where you are and listening to your emotions, listening to your body, and doing things about them, I think is a big piece of the puzzle. There is a Dr. Maslach. She made something called a burnout inventory. She originally designed it for medical personnel because she was in the medical field. But the burnout inventory and that her research is extremely applicable to tech. And you can even like check out some of her talks. I think she was doing talks for the annual DevOps event that the author of the Phoenix Project like ran. So yeah, I've read a little bit about the clinical aspect of burnout as well as experiencing personally.
Yeah, and I'm super happy that this layoff turned into something good for you. It led the way to you establishing your own company. And I find it so interesting that from what I can see from your posts, like you're running this company basically on the road, right? You're moving all the time. You're basically living kind of like a nomadic lifestyle. Is that correct?
That's right. I do live nomadically. I am literally on this call using Starlink in the middle of the high desert in Nevada right now. I converted my Tacoma pickup truck. I called her Molly. I converted my pickup truck into a mobile battle station. I am standing in the truck bed, and I have comfortable sleeping quarters, 300 watts of solar, a refrigerator, a power system I built myself. So I've made this micro home out of this truck, and I've worked from everywhere, like my property out here in Nevada to the parking lot of an AMC movie theater somewhere in Boston. Like I work from anywhere, which is a lot of fun. I've been doing this type of thing for 2.5 years. I started Shirdomoto 3 years ago. I've been living nomadically for the past 2.5, and it's been the best adventure of my life. Like, doing work in the mountains. I had a bear climb in my truck once.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was a little scary. Back in those days, I was in a rooftop tent, not my cool camper thing now.
Was it a black bear or a brown
It was
bear?
well, I am alive, therefore it was a black bear.
Okay, cool.
It was the biggest black bear I've ever seen. It was gigantic. It was looking for
Mhm.
picnic baskets or something. But it crawled into the truck bed where I was sleeping above on the bed rack with the rooftop tent, and like it shifted the weight. And I had to get the keys out of my pocket and press the alarm button and go do that, and then the bear ran off when the alarm went off. Yeah.
Wow.
After that, I understood the necessity of building something that is enclosed. Like, this thing is enclosed. At least the
Mhm.
bear can't see me
Well.
or get in there. So, yeah.
So you mentioned Nevada and Boston. So you've done like a cross-country trip with your truck?
Every year. Yeah, every year.
Nice.
I'm actually planning to return to the Northeast in a month. Right now, I have a 6x10 cargo trailer that I am converting. Like, after this call, I'm drilling holes and installing windows and vent fans and installing 1,000 watts of solar, and we're doing the whole business. And it's going to be my mobile war room and office that I can work in during inclement weather.
That's so cool. And for some engineers or people who are also interested in this, what's the price tag for building such a mobile home as you've done?
I mean, the cargo trailer thing is actually rather economical. You can pick it up for like $4,000 to $5,000, and then whatever you need to do, the price can go up. But you need to insulate it, obviously. You need some ventilation, some electrification. There's a whole universe of people out there that do this kind of thing. I'm just one of the few that like combine nomadic living and tech and made it work. But the truck, it's a Tacoma with a custom camper on top from a company called Go Fast. I got this one used, but it really depends on what your needs are. I mean, I see people rocking it out in a Prius, and then I also see people in more sophisticated rigs. But yeah, cost of entry can be low if you know a bit about cars and you're willing to, roll up your sleeves and do work.
So what inspired you to start this endeavor of camping and traveling and pimping up your car?
Yeah. Well, I've only lived in 2 places prior to this journey, and I was spending my whole life working and basically doing what people told me to do, what is expected of a young man. You go to college, you get your degree, you get a good job, you work your way up. I did that. And at the end of that corporate road, I realized, hey man, I'm not as happy as I should be about this. I've made some massive accomplishments, but I'm not feeling it. And since I started my own business and realized, hey, do I really want to pay this much rent in the Boston metro area? If I didn't stay in Boston, what would I do? And I found a YouTube video of this guy who took a U-Haul truck, like a moving truck, and he turned it into an apartment on wheels. And I'm like, huh, that's kind of cool. And I started going down this YouTube rabbit hole and learning that there's like a whole, community of people that live like this. And I just researched and watched a bunch of YouTube, and then decided I sold everything. I did not renew the lease at that apartment and drove out west in my Civic. And a few months later, I got Molly and set it up and started. But yeah, it was an understanding that I had a lot of life experience that I needed to catch up on. I spent too much time, ironically, on a tech podcast. I spent too much time on the computer and not enough time out in the world. And I realized I needed to have that experience to balance me out, because I'm more than just a DevOps SRE dude. Like, I'm a human being with my own flavor. Got experience.
You need to go out and touch some grass.
Got to touch some grass, and I touched more than grass out here in the world. Rocks, mountains, water, all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of things to touch out here. Yeah, 100%.
So you mentioned your bear incident. Has there been any other interesting adventures while you've been on the road?
I mean, there so many. I mean, I did Cinnamon Pass in Colorado with friends, which is an off-road, a little technical, a little challenging. I've been to Wyoming. I've been to Yellowstone, Grand Teton. I camped in some public land near there where you can see the bears. I sometimes hear wild burros out where I'm at. I saw wild horses a few days ago. You can hear them walking, and you look out the tent window, and there it is. There's some horses. But yeah, I've crisscrossed the country a good number of times. And yeah, it's been nice. I have a sweetheart that's willing to indulge my craziness, and we go on adventures together. And yeah, it's been fun. I mean, that could be a whole episode about all the crazy places I've been.
Oh yeah, that sounds so cool.
Mm.
Probably there is an episode on your own podcast, right?
About this, there
Yeah.
should be. Because usually because I bring on a guest and we're talking about, the subject, but maybe I should do just one talking about this.
Yeah, even the takes and your lessons from Burnout, I think that would be a very useful episode for a lot of engineers, especially nowadays, because I feel like we've been promised that AI will make us more productive and we'll have to work less hours, when in reality, I feel like it's the opposite. Basically, sometimes you're just being burned out by the amount of work that you're expected to do with these tools now available.
Yes, my views on that would probably be considered very subversive. And I'll just leave it at that, where we need more workers. Let's be honest, that's what we are. We are workers. We need conditions that are more human.
Totally.
Yeah, I agree.
We always like to ask our guests, do you have any hot takes about SRE, DevOps, AI, anything related to tech?
Yeah. All right, hot take. And I say this with the greatest amount of respect. I don't mean to gatekeep the practice of SRE, but I'll say this: if you have an SRE role, if you have a job title, that's SRE, and right now you're in the corner writing YAML and getting paged, I want you to really question whether or not that is in fact an SRE role. SRE is a practice where you are taking a not so reliable system and transforming it into a reliable system and making customers happy through SLOs, toil management, capacity planning, right? All of those higher order operational responsibilities, and using software engineering. That's very, very important. That is the SRE practice. So YAML is not a programming language. If that's what you're doing most of the time, I encourage you, get out into deeper waters. It's great out here. There's a great community, a lot of people that will be more than happy to teach you, but make sure you're finding roles that challenge you and help you grow.
The Phoenix Project book, it made the word DevOps popular. And since then, there are people who are DevOps engineers who do what you said, like write YAML and spin up Kubernetes pods and all that stuff. And it's like kind of like the DevOps that the book was talking about is not somebody who does that. It's more like what you explained, bridging two different, what's the word? Like not systems, but disciplines together. And I think it's quite common, like I said, in the world to see, I'm a DevOps engineer, I'm learning DevOps. And it's like, it's not that, it's what you explain. And it's difficult now to bridge that because it's now so common that people are DevOps engineers and it's not seen as what you explained. But yeah, it's difficult to go back now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about semantics and names, so I'll try to qualify what I'm saying. When I mean DevOps, yeah, indeed, we're not talking about a set of tools. We're not talking about a specific team. Title, tool, or team. People talk about this all the time. No, it's not that. It is the practice of joining technology, people, leadership process so that we can deliver software to the customer in a way that is as fast as possible, non-disruptive, and is as good for the business as possible. Like that, to me, is what DevOps is. And the means to get there is diverse. It isn't just Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a piece of the puzzle. It's not just, CI/CD. It's a piece of the puzzle. Sometimes it's also sitting down and listening to people. Sometimes it's talking about building vision and strategy. Sometimes, it's about sending your teams on a day off after they got paged one too many times at 3 a.m. DevOps is about the whole holistic view rather than just the tools. The tools are sexy. I get it. People want to sell the tools, but that's only one facet of the whole experience.
Yeah.
Speaking of tools, do you have any of your favorite tools that you use?
Oh gosh, okay. Let me think about that. Yeah, I'll volunteer one. So there lately have been a lot of incidents in GitHub recently. And we've kind of gotten into the habit of, hey, I would like my build processes and my testing pipelines to be in Vendor. There is a tool that you can run instead if you want to self-host your stuff called Concourse. And I like Concourse. It allows you to build very sophisticated pipelines for testing or build or delivery or what have you using YAML. Each little section runs in a container, but you self-host it. And the reason why I really like it is that the open source community, like the governance, is its own governance model. It's not owned by a company that can, swap out the license and turn it into a SaaS, which we've seen many times for other projects. So if you're getting frustrated with, using the cloud service du jour for your CI/CD, check out Concourse. Use it, run it on-prem. Maybe you're going backwards 5 or 10 years in terms of philosophy, but it might be more stable. Who knows?
Cool. I've never heard of it. I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's good stuff. There's some companies out there that definitely use it. And yeah, friends don't let friends run Jenkins. Like that's done. Don't do that. Don't do that.
So you're saying Jenkins is dead?
Did I say that?
No. It wasn't a gotcha question.
But what I am saying is that there's some more options, and I don't think people want to write groovy scripts anymore. So
yeah,
other
Jenkins
things out there to try.
has been a pain for me as well.
Yeah,
when I've used it. Yeah,
very good.
Is there anything you want to plug? Like you do a podcast. Is there anything else you want to plug before we wrap up?
Sure, let's do that. I'm always grateful for that. Yes. I am a consultant at my company, Certomodo. That's CERTOMODO.io. I specialize in assessing companies' reliability, DevOps, and SRE posture. If you're getting paged a lot, if you're not shipping often, if customers are angry, you should definitely put some time on my calendar. I also run a podcast called Reliability Rebels, where I interview people talking about how SRE isn't just the tools, it's also challenging the status quo, talking about the socio-technical. And then on the 24th of February, I am doing a webinar about the AI flood of code. I think I call it the AI code tsunami. And I do webinars monthly talking about all kinds of interesting subjects. So if you're interested, check out my website and you can learn all about that stuff. Thanks so much for the opportunity to plug.
No worries. Thank you, Amin, for speaking about all these SRE adventures and lessons learned. It's been very fun to have you. So thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode to the Better Stack podcast. Subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, pick your poison. But for now, it's a goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me.